Hi, it's Lee and welcome to the Tesla Economist. Alright, it looks like we're getting some very exciting information, or perhaps I should say more potential evidence that my theory on Tesla's plans for energy, Model 3 and Model Y, are correct. Let's start from my entire theory in all this. As we know, or at least most of us do, is that EV growth is constrained by cell and battery supply. There simply are not enough being produced to make enough EVs for everyone. On top of that, they are expensive, and they take a long time to manufacture and require enormous factories in order to do so, like we saw with Giga Nevada. Then there was a breakthrough with LFP cells, and China went hard out building LFP cell factories, namely CATL, and BYD also making their own in-house cells too. This was a lower cost cell that was much easier to produce over the cells with nickel-based cathodes. The disadvantage of LFP is that it is less energy dense, and thus limits range of electric vehicles, or means you have to have a really heavy battery pack in order to achieve a decent range, which affects performance, handling, and braking. If the vehicle is able to achieve a more efficient drivetrain, then it is capable of getting more range and performance from the same size battery. Now, Tesla's drivetrain is second to none, hence the range they achieve with smaller batteries compared to most. CATL announced their new cell and battery, the M3P cells and the tsla battery. These M3P cells are often referred to as LMFP, but that's actually incorrect, which would be a lithium manganese iron phosphate battery. People inferred this due to the fact that the M3P cell is indeed using manganese in the cathode. What the M3P cell actually is a hybrid of LFP and a ternary cathode containing manganese, zinc, and aluminium. Note it doesn't contain cobalt or nickel. All high energy dense cells still contain cobalt. Due to this hybrid, CATL were able to obtain a more energy dense cell than LFP, offering them much additional energy density, which can make all the difference. And on top of that, also at the same cost as traditional LFP cells. This essentially means that EVs can now get longer range with lower cost cells, and might provide an adequate sweet spot of range for many vehicles. That was only previously achieved before with the more expensive and rarer nickel-based cells. Which is why I've been saying for some time what a big deal these cells are. It will mean we have vehicles capable of ranges in excess of 300 miles with lower cost cells. This probably saves around $3,000 per battery to hit that same range that wasn't before possible without nickel cells. And I think 300 to 330 miles of range is going to be sufficient enough for the vast majority of drivers. I know some people have this idea that EV ranges will only get better, and in several years' time they'll be getting 500 miles, but I don't think that will be the case. If anything, they may reduce as charging gets faster and chargers become more ubiquitous, in order to get costs of EVs down, which is what this is all about. If we want mass EV adoption, then it will come down to cost. Now, from time to time, I've been mentioning updates on the new CATL factory that has been going up over the last year or so, as it was initially meant to have an 80 gigawatt hour capacity, and could be even as high as 100 gigawatt hours a year of production. Tesla is CATL's biggest customer by a long way, and without 4680 cells in high volume production, Tesla depend on CATL for cell supply, as Tesla need a lot of cells, and like we were saying before, is that the other cells take far too long to make, and require enormous factories, whereas LFP are much simpler and can be ramped up in higher quantities at lower costs. So Tesla totally depend on CATL for large supply of cells. Now, Panasonic are ramping up their own 4680s too, but only at around 30 gigawatt hours a year, which isn't really close to the levels that CATL can produce. CATL recently retrofitted an old factory down the road from Giga Shanghai that reached around 60 to 80 gigawatt hours a year too, of LFP cells, and that was what was responsible for the increase in Model Y and 3 production from those factories that we saw at the end of last year, along with the energy supply, and why Tesla were announcing they finally have enough cells. But the thing about this new factory that really caught my attention is that this is also across the road from Giga Shanghai. Call me crazy, but that is why I assume that Tesla will be benefiting from this new factory that CATL have built, and that it is to supply Tesla. And with CATL's new M3P technology, which, like we said, is more energy dense than LFP, yet the same cost, then it would only make sense that these are the cells that they're going to be producing at this factory, and thus supplying Tesla. Now, the new CATL factory is ramping and will take time to reach capacity, and it's not even fully built yet either. But now we're getting the headlines that the new Model 3 Highland will be using M3P cells as part of the update. It is supposedly now a 66 kilowatt-hour battery compared to the previous LFP 60 kilowatt-hour battery, presumably the same size, but the additional energy density gives that much better energy capacity. This is going to be quite a bit more range. It will easily be over 300 miles. This is for a rear-wheel drive Model 3. So imagine if the Model 3 Highland comes out with over 300 miles of range, along with this new facelift and other features like Hardware 4. Tesla will be able to raise the price, I'd say. Yet possibly the cost might not have increased by much, as there are a lot of cost savings in this update involved too. However, like I said at the start, CATL also have a new battery, the chill-in battery, which is actually a structural battery pack using the cooling ribbons as structure rather than the actual cells, which would result in further weight saving. So I don't know, the range might be in the low 300 miles. That is some serious range for what might still be relatively low-cost car. So this could be huge. As I was saying, this was my theory not just for the Model 3, but the Model Y and energy. What happens when Tesla moves over to these new batteries for their Model 3s in Shanghai? Well, it means they will replace the old LFP batteries. Now, what do you think Tesla are going to do with all those excess LFP cells that they no longer require in the Model 3? They will be shipped to Lathrop to be used in the Megapack factory there. The Megapack factory can only ramp as fast as there are cells, because like vehicles, energy is also cell constrained. Tesla will use the more energy-dense M3P cells in their vehicles and use the old LFP cells in energy, which is fine, because energy density is not important for energy storage. So this will mean we should also get to see some ramping when it comes to the Megapack factory once this is all in place. As for the Model Y, well, obviously the same will happen there too. In fact, we already know it was going to occur, and it is known as the Model Y Juniper update, the equivalent of the Highland for the 3. It will get a facelift and all the other features, along with this new battery pack, which should take the Model Y perhaps to around 260 to 270 miles of range for the rear-wheel drive, which is going to make a big difference. In fact, it might even mean it's also suitable for the US market too. So as the CATL factory ramps up more M3P cells, there will eventually be enough to go into all Model Ys in the Shanghai factory too. If the target was 80 gigawatt hours a year, then that seems to be about right. And then there'll be a lot of additional LFP cells available for energy storage. In fact, likely too many, more than Lathrop could actually handle. Which is why Tesla is building the Shanghai Megapack factory too, which will be able to build enough Megapacks for this additional LFP supply. I mean, the math all works out too. A new 80 gigawatt hour a year cell factory and two 40 gigawatt hour a year Megapack factories. Anyway, I'm really glad that it looks like my early predictions were right, and that I still have a good understanding on how this business works. It's still all about batteries. Hi there, I'm using Verbalate AI video translation and lip sync software. It's pretty amazing. Watch this. I can translate my videos into other languages. For example, I am now speaking Hindi.
नमस्ते, मैं पहली बार हिंदी में बोल रहा हूं, लेकिन वर्बलेट इसे इतना आसान बना देता है.
Or how about Spanish?
Hola, vaya, increíble.
También puedo hablar español. Sign up at verbalate.ai today to gain early access to trial the product for creators and strategic partners, and gain the ability to translate and lip sync videos in all major languages. You can view the info in the description below.